Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Johnson, and welcome to my latest project. Today, I'm bringing a fresh twist to this tile-based game called Tournamental, and I used a little bit of inspiration from another game that I was reviewing called Croft Go. From Croft Go, I saw this mechanic that had me a little intrigued, and it had me wanting to build a mechanic of my own, this mechanic being shifting spike traps, which you'll see how they work here in just a moment. So, let's hop right into it. As we hop into the game, you'll see that nothing's really going on with the traps. You can just see them sitting there static. Well, we can move forward. Nothing still happens as I progress onto the trap. Now, as I get off of the trap, this is where all the magic's going to begin to happen. Once the player steps onto a normal floor tile, now all traps will shift up that are active or inactive, and all traps that are active will then shift down. So, as you can see, it'll happen for every movement I make on that style of tile. Now the player has to think about exactly where they move and how they move in order to progress through the level. Moving on to level 2, I implement two different versions of this trap now. There's one trap which is being controlled by a timer, and I set a variable as instance editable to where I could shift the timer for every trap on map. So as you can see, it led to different effects such as the ones you're seeing now, which then makes it to where the player really has to think about their approach through each scenario. Because as you can see, now I've blocked off passage due to the way that I went through the last area. So now I have to then, once again, open up passage so I can progress forward. And as the player progresses further and further through the level, you'll notice that I also will increase the time within level 2 that these spike traps shift. This last one here shifts every 1.5 seconds to make it even more of a challenge for the player to have to overcome. Now, progressing on to level 3, this is where I tried to implement multiple paths the player could take, though not all paths actually work in player's favor. Such as, if the player is to take this left path the entire time, they will then block off the point that'll actually make them safely be able to get through. So this will only open up the opportunity of them going like this, then they'll go over here and realize they're completely stuck, where they'll then have to just sacrifice their life. So if we want to get through this properly, you'll have to take the right path. And that allowed me to get right through. So here, I warned the players, hey, patience is key, move carefully, because these traps can be a little tricky. As the traps go up or down, the other ones, either behind or right next to it, might be moving at the same pace. So it can be dangerous sometimes to get on these spikes. As you can see, now I have another way that I cannot progress forward, so I have to do that in order to progress forward. So now that we're in a shifting zone, you can see that right here I get completely stuck and I can no longer progress forward. But that's why I have one trap set on a timer, so I could then use that to shift the traps and make it to where I can progress. Which I have to do it one more time in order to progress toward the end of the level. Then here we do the same thing but in a different formation. Now you can see how this mechanic affects gameplay within Tournamental. I truly hope you enjoy. Now, let's go ahead and hop over to the editor side of things to see how it all works. Now, over in editor's view, we can take a look at the components that I use to piece together my main mechanic. Well, these are the components right here. So basically, all I had done is I used Geometry Brush in order to create these 4 components. After creating these 4 components in Geometry Brush, I had then used these 3 right here in order to piece together the base for my spike trap. And then I added a cylinder as well and just gave it a little darker gray tone to act as a screw holding all of those little components down. And then I used the spike that I'd created from Geometry Brush in order to duplicate and match up with every one of these little square holes that I had available. And after I got them all matched up, then I just basically resized them, scaling up and down, and made it to where I could easily make them look like a nice set of spikes that go up and down to stab the player. I then also shifted the texture on the top to make it look as if it has stabbed people in the past, or it's definitely used as a deadly weapon. So that was all the visual cues and the way that I pieced together the mechanic. Now we'll hop over to the blueprint side of things. So coming over to the blueprint side of things, we'll explore the dispatcher first. So with the dispatcher, you'll see that all we're really doing on tile floor, so all of the gray ground that we walk on, we are checking, hey, is the current entity player? If that condition is true, then we're basically just saying, hey, do something. So that's how we work with the first set of traps that you see on level 1, where every time that you move just on the gray tiles, you'll see them shift, because what we're basically doing is we're just getting all of tile floor, and then we're binding to the activator event, and every time that it detects the player on the normal tile, it basically says, hey, do something. So I'm not going to explain this code because this code is roughly the same as what I got going on in the next blueprint, so I'll explain it over here. Now, hopping over here, the first major difference is we're going by set timer by event rather than a dispatcher. So what we have going on is I created a custom variable which is instance editable, and that's what allows me to tweak the time for every one of my timer traps on map. And then each time, or each every time that it says basically, hey, our timer's complete, it'll tell this event to do something. So then it comes down to my custom event for shifting spikes, and right away we check the spikes that are up, and if true, set false, vice versa. So basically what that's doing in a bit more of a descriptive term is we're basically checking, hey, is this spike currently up? If the spike is currently up, then let's set it to not be up anymore. And the reason why we're doing that is because then when this event calls again, then it'll then go from false back to true. So then it will go from down to up, down to up, down to up every time that I step on a different tile. So that's how this all works right here. And then, as we said, vice versa. If it's set to false, so as we just did right here, after the spike goes down and it's set to false, or after the spike goes down, it's set to false, then basically it'll end up coming up every time because it needs to go up. And then we play two sounds. One sound is for the spike trap going down, and one sound is for the spike trap going up. From there, we're just shifting the pitch on the sounds to make sure that it never sounds too much like the same sound and it's not getting repetitive to the player. Then I had also created a variable to adjust the volume on the fly, so I could use spike traps within my main menu in order to tweak the sound and make sure that I got it right where I wanted it to be, so it wasn't overwhelming the player too much right as they open the game. Now let's go ahead and move forward. So as we come over to the timeline where it handles the whole transition from the spikes being in the up position to the down position, you'll see that I use a lerp vector node to transfer the positionings from the up position to the down position. And the only thing that we're shifting the position of is the SM spikes within my viewport, which is this top component. So from here, you can see that after it updates as what we're doing when we come to the finished event. So on finished of the timeline, we're just checking to see if the current entity is standing, or the current entity standing on the tile. If that current entity is entity player, and then the spikes are currently set to be up, then this condition will meet true. And what happens after this is then we would play two sounds signifying, hey, the player just got stabbed by a bunch of spikes that are rising up. And then on top of that, we'll get a loud grunt signifying, hey, the player just took some damage. So from there, we'll have to disable the movement for the player. The reason why we do this is because I realized in an earlier playtest that basically what would happen, I could get stabbed by those spikes and it would reset the level, but it wouldn't reset the level until after the animation had finished playing. So what we had to do is we had to remove the movement so they could not no longer move, because what was happening is I could get stabbed by the spikes, jump off of the tile, and then on a safe tile, I would just randomly reset. So what this did is this made it to where I can no longer move off of that tile. If I got caught in the sequence of, hey, the spikes are coming up, you're dead, then it would instantly signify, play those sounds to notify the player they just died, and then right after that it disables the movement, so the player can't get out of that square until the reset event is done. And the reason why we had to delay the reset event is to allow these sounds to play through. So I went to the longest sound that I had, which was the grunt, and then I just set it for the exact time that the grunt was. So right after the grunt finishes, then reset map plays. Now, the code down here is roughly the same, but the only reason why it's any different is because this one is not checking for if the entity is currently standing on the tile. The only reason why this exists is because on the timer spike trap, the player can be standing on tile for too long, and eventually those spikes can rise while the player is standing on that tile, and it will kill them. It was really buggy in the beginning without this line of code. So this line of code was to ensure that the death sequence all worked out just right. Now down here, all this code is checking for is, hey, are the spikes currently up? And if the spikes are currently up, and the player just hopped onto a tile where the spikes are currently up, then basically we're going to disable movement, play these sounds. By the time that the longer sound is over, reset the map. And that's exactly how this code all works. But I hope this gives you a good explanation into how both sets of code works, and I will let you take a quick glance as well at how this one over here works for the dispatcher, because like I said, it is exactly the same, except for we're just not taking an event off of onFinished, because there's no way possible that the player could stand on this spike trap as it's shifting. It only shifts as they move between the tile floor. Thank you for watching, and I truly hope that you enjoyed this mechanic.